I'm delighted to speak at this conference on our ocean wealth and honoured that so many of you have joined us in this maritime city of Cork. You will see above the screen the emblem of this city, which sums it up. And its motto, as the Lord Mayor reminded us earlier, is a safe harbour for ships. I extend a particular welcome to those of you who have travelled great distances in some cases. In particular, former US Secretary of State, as I've already mentioned, John Kerry, Minister from Malta, and representatives in particular from more than 30 small island developing states across the Pacific, the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, and the African coast. Many of us have had the opportunity over the course of the weekend to experience an Oceans Festival on the quays of this city. In and around 100,000 people have decided to be part of that festival and this conversation. Water gives life. It unites. Our oceans and our people are interdependent. We know that. The implications of this interdependence for us all, I hope, will be explored not only in the formal sessions that we're hearing today, but also in the conversations that happen in the margins, often where the real work is done. We are an island on the edge of one continent, but very much looking across the Atlantic Ocean to another. Our history and our people are shaped by events linked to that ocean, by migration, by people movements across the seas and oceans in both directions. We understand from our experiences how the fate of different peoples, of different nations are intertwined and even sometimes conjoined. Indeed, an old Irish phrase, when you translate it, translates as people live in the shadow of one another. But what's interesting about the Irish language is that the word for shadow, ska, is also the same word for shelter. Our world today is shadowed by multiple crises, nearly all of them man-made. But perhaps the biggest crisis of all is the challenge to the rules-based system which gives us the only hope of putting a global framework in place to provide shelter from many of those crises, within which we can cooperate to our mutual advantage and in some cases for survival. Climate change reminds us of our interconnectedness. Nations impacted by each other. Small countries. We can find shelter together. Acting together, we have voice, we have agency. A collective voice and a collective vote will be listened to if it's harnessed to its true potential. Ireland, for our part, will continue to make a determined defence of multilateralism, even if it means standing up to our friends. We believe in openness, in cooperation, in partnership, the power of the collective, fighting for multilateralism, for partnership, for friendship, ensuring that the small and the weak are heard, is part of why Ireland is running for a seat in the UN Security Council in the next few years. In challenging times, with threats of the kind of catastrophe that many of you understand only too well, those of us who believe in the United Nations must find our voice and be heard. Our active membership of the UN is the bedrock of foreign policy for this country. This commitment is at the heart of what we call Global Ireland, an initiative to double Ireland's global impact by 2025, which we are investing in heavily. Over the past 12 months, we have opened 8 new embassies and consulates across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas. And we have strengthened our presence in multilateral institutions, in particular in the UN. 2 more missions will open in the coming months, with a further 3 new diplomatic missions next year. Each of these new missions will enhance Ireland's ability to influence the international debates and the events that we are discussing today. As part of our commitment to double our global impact, we have launched also a new international development strategy called A Better World. That policy is centred on the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular the SDG commitments to reach the furthest behind first. Ireland was very proud, together with Kenya, to play its part in chairing sessions that helped to broker the United Nations agreement on the SDGs, which many thought was impossible, including working with small island states to ensure SDG 14 around our oceans. Our new international development policy prioritises addressing gender equality, reducing humanitarian need, climate action, as you would expect, and strengthening governance as essential building blocks for sustainable development. The strategy for partnership with small island states that we launched together with you yesterday in Cork represents the first outworking of our commitments in that new development policy. Ireland strongly believes that we can only address the climate challenge if we take a strong climate justice approach, emphasising the needs and realities of those who have most to lose, yet ironically have done least to contribute to the problem. Whether that be a woman farmer in Africa, struggling to feed her family because of drought and lack of water, or indeed an island state facing a very real threat to your very existence in the future. The new SID strategy is grounded in our firm belief in and commitment to the value of partnership and dialogue. That is why we will establish a permanent network of envoys to work with our SIDS friends. It's also why we will convene a series of what we call Céilís, which essentially are gatherings and forums for discussion in the margins of major international events. Céilís are listening spaces in our culture. They're very like, actually, the Tánaiste or conversation circles, which our Pacific Island friends have used so effectively at UN level. Flowing from these discussions, we can work together effectively, whether in our continued cooperation on SIDS-related processes in the UN, including the Samoa pathway, or in exciting new ventures in areas like ocean innovation. It is why we want to help with education through the proposed SIDS scholarship scheme and support UN volunteer placements in the Pacific and the Caribbean and further afield. Because these people-to-people contacts improve our understanding of each other, as indeed the last few days have done for me. As we work to address the extraordinarily serious and generational challenges that this generation must face, because no matter how smart the next generation is, and we've just heard from one of them, what we leave behind will not be recoverable if we don't act now. Take, for example, the new trust fund, which Ireland has established at the Asian Development Bank. In this, we have committed to investing 12 million euros, initially anyway, over the next 6 years to enhance small island development states' resilience in the face of climate and other pressures. We want this trust fund to be practical and responsive to the concerns and needs of small island states, and we have had a lot of discussion around access to funds and finance in the last 2 days. To do this, we have incorporated into the Trust Fund's management arrangements specific provision for small island partners to participate in the annual consultative meetings of the Fund should they wish to do so, which has not been the case to date. Our aim is to provide SIDS with the opportunity to help to shape the strategic direction of the Fund into the future. We want you to own it, essentially, in terms of its future direction, and to enable SIDS provide their own feedback on its operation. In a similar vein, our deepening relationship with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility aims to establish further partnerships and risk management. And let me tell you, Ireland wants to do a lot more in this space and area in terms of capacity and funding. As a small country, we know how hard it can be sometimes to be heard. Carmela will relate to me when I say that. Yet as a small country, we also know how powerful we can be when our friends understand our concerns and are working with us in solidarity. Brexit has taught us that. Our membership of the European Union is a successful example of small countries working together to create a scale and a collective strength that can change things, big things, quickly. We need to work in community with our friends outside the European Union too now, to ensure that the EU understands and responds to their needs. Whether that's a new agreement to replace the Coveney partnership, or economic partnership agreements individually in different parts of the world. That's why we will step up our dialogue with you on EU matters in Brussels and bring the weight of our diplomatic efforts to bear, not least in the finalisation of the Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, which brings together almost all of the EU's external financing during the next EU financial framework. These are challenging times for all of us. The great Irish poet Seamus Heaney told us that hope is not optimism which expects things to turn out well, but something rooted in the conviction that there is a good worth working for. On the oceans and on the climate challenge that we're focusing on today, Ireland is here to listen to you, to be a friend and a partner and a collaborator. We believe that there is good worth working for and indeed fighting for if necessary. That working in partnership together we can overcome the challenges that threaten to engulf us if we try to face them alone. I am very conscious of the privilege that this country holds and the responsibilities that we have to lead by example in word as well as deed. Challenges that are killing people and killing ecosystems today must get a response that works. It is becoming increasingly apparent that the nations and the corporations that are not willing to be part of the solutions are increasingly part of the problem that needs to be exposed. This room and the people in it are interested in being part of the solutions.